Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Krishna Nam Sankirtan ki jai. Oh, Premanandi. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Ajinulambita Bhujo Kanakavadato Sankirtanai Kapitaro Kamalaya Taksho Vishwambaro Dvijabaro Yugodharma Palo Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavatararo Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodito Bodharai Pushpavanto Chitro Samdo Tamununo Vandeham Shri Ramakrishno Abhaya Charano Sako Sukado Paramanando Sundaro Subala Priyo He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchan Gourangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Shri Gauri Vaishnava Guru Parampara Ki Jai Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita Ki Jai Oh, Premanandi. Some light? Light? Ah, good. Tamasi Ma Jyoti Gamaha. From darkness to light. Yeah. So we want to discuss, we'll read a little bit from Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is from the Madhya Lila and the 7th chapter. Dhanyam tam nomi Chaitanyam Vasudevam Dayadvadi Nashta Kushtam Rupam Pushtam Bhakti Tushtam Chakaraya. Kaviraj Goswami starts his chapters typically with a Sanskrit verse, although the text is primarily in Bengali. The way it works, of course, is that he's telling leading us through the narrative, and of course, in the context of that, philosophical, theological points are made, and typically he supports the philosophical points that he makes in Bengali with a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, the texts of the Goswamis, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Ujjwali Mani, and so forth. But as I say, and we see it here at the beginning of the chapter, usually we find a Sanskrit verse of his own composition that highlights something in the chapter that that he feels is of central importance. Kaviraj Goswami was a great scholar, and he wrote in Bengali not because of any lack of understanding of Sanskrit, which was the educated religious language of the Brahmanas. For example, he wrote the Govinda Lilamrita, which is a poetic text of thousands and thousands of slokas based on 11 Sanskrit verses of Rupa Goswami, detailing in outlining, I should say, the divisions of the typical day in the life of Krishna, Astakal, Lila, Smaranam, 8 Astakal times of the day. So he elaborated on that with thousands of verses, famous book, Govinda Lilamrita. He also wrote a commentary, Sanskrit commentary on Kavi Karnapur's Krishna Karnamrita, as he describes later in this Madhya Lila, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in the south, deep in the south, he came across Krishna Karnamrita, a book composed by Bilva Mangala Thakur. As well, he came across a book which constitutes the 5th chapter of the Brahma Samhita. He brought those books back with him, and he told the devotees that the Siddhanta is the tattva of what I'm about, what my dispensation is about at heart. The tattva, the philosophy, the key foundational points are found in Brahma Samhita, this 5th chapter. What are those? What is that point? Who can say? Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swami. Is that what it says in the book? It says it in another way, right? Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. So he's the Adi Purusha. There in that text we find mention of Shiva, who we'll see today, Mahadev, Durga, Ganesh, Ramadi, Murti, Ram, and different avatars and so forth. They're all discussed, glorified, praised, but some context is given. And this is the context amongst all of them. Govindam is the Adi Purusha, or Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, which is a verse found in Bhagavatam that Jiva Goswami said is the password to unlocking the philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Incidentally, while we're on that point for a moment, it's worth pointing out why that's important. Why is it important that Krishna is the fountainhead of all? Why can't he just be one of the other avatars and leave it at that? And you have to distinguish your sampradaya from others by making him supreme. I mean, all of God's manifestations are equal. People will argue like this, and what's our reply? Well, one way in which we can think of this is that in Vaikuntha, Narayan has many faces, right? He has the face of Varaha, Nrsimha, Vamana, and these are thought to be avatars that descend. They're either historically avatars like Ram, that's maybe, or a little later, or they're in the mytho-historical era, and they're like kind of, whether they happened on Earth or not, physically, really, is a question that some devotees might ask, but it's really not of much importance to us. The point is that these are temperaments, dispositions of God that are found in Vaikuntha. And you could even say the stories about them are told, descend, that we make people become acquainted with different principal faces of Bhagavan. Another thing in this connection that I'm reminded of, sometimes I try to find some class to listen to, see what's out there in the Gaudiya Sampradaya. So I was listening to some younger devotees giving the Bhagavatam class in a place called the Bhakti Center. It's in New York. It's supposed to be an open-minded place and so forth. So I was listening to a class, and one nice Vaishnavi was giving the Bhagavatam class. My way of looking at this kind of thing has always been from the beginning that if I could hear one point in the whole class that was significant, I thought it would be successful. I was trying to mine, some gem from it. But aside from that, the one of the points that she was emphasizing was that she was referencing Chaitanya Bhagavat, and Chaitanya Bhagavat said that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed the form of Varaha to, I think, Murari Gupta and etc. And she said, she was emphasizing, we have to believe this. I believe this. You know, you could obviously see that she was questioning it. And I really don't believe, but I should believe. He's God. He can do anything. And she was making that kind of a point. It wasn't the greatest point. I mean, I appreciated what she was trying to do, but but I made a little comment. I said, "There's another way you can come in between here, because there's a type of darshan which is more prominent. It's called antardarshan. Antardarshan." Like, let us say you're standing before the deity of the Panchatattva, and Nityananda Prabhu says something to you, right? And then you turn around and you see nobody else heard that, nobody else saw that, but it was shown, right? So it doesn't have to be shown in such a way that everybody with physical eyes sees. It could be, sure, no problem. But these moods would appear in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at different times. Nrsimha mood. He showed to Srivas Thakur. That's a very beautiful story from Chaitanya Bhagavat. Because Srivas Thakur was, as you can imagine, worshipping Nrsimhadev in his home. Why would we think, yeah, that makes sense? Because Srivas Thakur is Narada Muni. And Narada Muni is Madhumangal. As Krishna expands in different leelas to interact with different devotees, with different types of love, so his associates in Vrindavan, they go with him. When he goes to Dwarka, Radha and Chandravali also come, and they become Satyabhama and Rukmini, respectively. So Narada is the Vaidhi Bhakti, farcical Brahman, sourced, if you will, in Madhumangal. And Srivas Thakur is that same person in Gaur Leela. And who does Madhumangal worship? Well, in the house of Nanda Maharaj, where he's been adopted. He's been adopted there. He's the Brahman who does the puja, and the deity is Nrsimha. You can go to Nandagram there and see the deity of Nrsimha worshipped by Nanda Maharaj, right? His family. So he was worshiping the Shalagram, and the door was closed, and he was worshiping. That means his mind was fully there. The door was locked so that he would not be disturbed, and he was doing the morning puja. And Gaurhari came, started pounding on the door, broke his meditation. He said, "Open the door. Who you are worshiping is standing outside the door." Something like that. He broke down the door. When Srivas, he looked at Srivas and said, "Savers, I'm here." So he showed him the bhava. It was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the bhava of Nrsimha. If he's in the bhava of Nrsimha, then Nrsimha is present. He manifested in the Leela, right? Of course, Srivas Thakur picked out a beautiful verse from the Bhagavatam, from Brahma's prayers, appropriate from a how you say, a Sakyaras Leela. Because Madhumangal is steeped in Sakyaras as a Narmasaka. The first prayer of Brahma's beautifully describing Krishna, distinguishing him from Narayan by his characteristics and peacock feather, his flute, and his ornamentation, rustic as it is, rather than majestic, and so forth. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in different ways, exhibited the bhava of different avatars of Narayan, which starts to build the case that they're all inside of him. right? So, okay, that means he's Narayan, right? Hmm? No, we take it a step further, and we emphasize that, and of course we give our references from the scripture and so forth to support it. They could be interpreted in other ways that are also valid. This is a particular angle of vision. In Vaikuntha, they don't think that Krishna is the source of Narayan. They think Krishna is one of the avatars of Narayan. But when Gopakumar went to Vaikuntha, and Narayan showed the Krishna Lila to him, he was very attracted because Gopal Krishna is his deity, but he wasn't quite, it didn't quite fit for him. And one of the reasons is because Narayan can show that Krishna Lila, but it's not shown in such a way that you can enter into it and participate in it. Narayan is worshipped in Shanta Bhakti, in Dasya Bhakti. He's not worshipped in Madhurya Rasa, Vatsalya Rasa. He doesn't have any parents. Doesn't have any buddies to pal around with and push him over and tell him, you keep quiet now. We've heard enough from you. But deal with him as an equal, to serve him and accept service from him. This is characteristic of that sentiment, right? Equality. This Sakyarasa is based on. Nobody's on equal terms with Narayan. So if Krishna is an avatar of Narayan, then although he comes to the world and shows his Leela, which is full of Madhurya Rasa, Sakya Rasa, Vatsalya Rasa, the Leelas that are so charming that they have the capacity to captivate all of the Indian subcontinent. Nobody how popular is the Varaha Purana in Bharat? How many translations of the Varaha Purana are there? How many commentaries are there on the Nrsimha Purana, the Kurm Purana? Probably none. How many translations are there in other languages? Probably none. How many are there translations of them in different Indian dialects? Probably none. And the Bhagavatam has at least 80 to 100 Sanskrit commentaries. It's been translated in every Indian dialect and has been translated in French and German and Spanish and English and nowadays and so forth, thanks to our Paribar. Because the Leelas are so, they're Leela Madhurya, they're very sweet, very charming. The beautiful thing about Krishna Leela, this is unique to Krishna. I've made this point before, but it's really worth emphasizing. One of the beautiful points about Krishna Leela, in hearing the narrative, which is so central to our practice, is that when you hear the narrative of Krishna, human-like, I mean, Ram is kind of human, but no, he's not human. Nobody can be that dharmic. That's impossible. So we have to look beyond. There's a lesson beyond being dharmic in Ramayana, of course. But in Krishna Lila, well, he appears adharmic like us a good part of the time. And he does things we hear in the Leela narrative that we can just fully identify with because we've done those things. We've felt that way. This causes an emotional bond with God that you cannot have through any other narrative of any other form of God. And that's not to minimize any other form of God. They're all perfect. But this is a feature of Krishna Lila that makes the Krishna Bhakti so user-friendly, natural, right? So if Krishna is an avatar of Narayan, and he comes to this world and shows these leelas, then the leela ends and it goes enfolds back into Narayan, and you worship him as an avatar of Narayan, and you go to Vaikuntha. Well, you're not going to be a cowherd boy there. You're not going to be a gopi. Those leelas are not available there. This is, Narayan, he's God. Sometimes he shows that charming face for fun, but okay. But our relationship with him is, he is God, we are the servant. It's beautiful. So the point is, if Krishna is not the source of Narayan, then he doesn't have his own abode. His abode is Vaikuntha, like the other avatars. And he can only be worshipped in Dasya, Shanta. But if he's the source of Narayan, he has his own loka, where the possibility of those types of relationships that are displayed in the Prakat Lila, in the manifest Lila on earth, it's possible to attain them. That's why in Brihad Bhagavatamrita of Sanatana Goswami, which is like the seminal book of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, we have two cantos. One canto is, what is what is the devotee who has the greatest mercy, the fullest mercy? And then when that's concluded, when Narada, Madhu Mangal, in the form of Narada in Dwarka, disturbs Krishna by asking some questions that cause him to tip off into Braj Bhav and lose sight of the fact that he's supposed to be a prince in this Leela in Dwarka and so forth. And then everything settles down and Narada apologizes and Krishna says, no, Gurupakari Smritida Priyanam. Don't think you didn't disturb me. One who reminds one of their beloved is the most dear friend. The Para Upakar. Upakari, best friend. So Narada Muni here is pointing to the virtues of Gopi's love. Then the question comes that if this is the highest love, where does it take place? Because it's not taking place in Vaikuntha. So therefore we need the Goloka Mahatmya, the next canto, all about ultimately Goloka Vrindavan, distinguished as it is in the text from every other loka, every other dimension, religious dimension that Gopakumar passes through, right? From one to another to another. Its virtues, its shortcomings, its virtues, he ends up in Goloka, right? And points to, look at the Gopi's love. This is very extraordinary. He's a Gopa himself. So this is one of the reasons why it's important for us to emphasize this point. Krishna is the source of Narayan. It means means those charming leelas that are narrated in the Bhagavatam. That means there's a possibility to enter into them, as inviting as they are. We would hope so, right? It would be a disappointment to think that it's not possible. So this is a key point. In the Bhagavatam it is said, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, and Jiva Goswami says, this is the Paribhas Sutra, the password for opening the program of the Bhagavatam, what it's really about, from what angle of vision, what is the whole thing anchored in? I mean, it's really like the Brihad Bhagavatam in short. Bhagavatam in longhand is a interfaith discourse dialogue. Nowadays, devotees want to have interfaith. There's already one in the Bhagavatam. That's what it is. It's interfacing all the different faiths. He's not criticizing any of them, just kind of looking at them from a particular frame of reference, how they differ from Krishna's Tu Bhagavan Swayam and all the implications of that. I mean, there's no text like the Bhagavatam that deals with Avatar Tattva, which is a cornerstone and the foundation of Hindu theology. Avatara, that there's a descent from outside of time and space, within time and space, of the Godhead for the exclusive purpose of bringing us out from our time-space limited frame of reference. Avatar Tattva, it's given in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, right? At the onset there. Very important. This is a cornerstone in Hindu theology, this Avatar. And this Avatar Tattva is nowhere given the treatment extends near to the same extent that has been given in the Bhagavatam. So many sections about this many avatars, that many, and then it has their Sankhya, Asankhya, unlimited, and then 10 chapters about Nrsimha, and a few chapters about Ram and Varaha, and again Varaha, and so on and so forth, and again a list of them, and you won't find this in again in the Kurma Purana. It's only about Kurma. In the Nrsimha Purana, it's only about Nrsimha, right? But in the Bhagavad Purana, then you have a tour de force, of all the different overview of all the different avatars and possibilities and praise of them and so forth, and at the same time a focus on their source, anchoring them, connecting them to Krishna, and therefore bringing out the virtues of Krishna as the fountainhead of divinity. It's an extraordinary theological work that, Jiva Goswami gave many arguments as to why the Bhagavatam should be seen as the central hub of Eastern revelation, around which all the other texts should rotate and be understood in context, in relation to. But we could give many, many other arguments as well, besides the ones that were relevant to his time. Some of which, we're just coming up with here as we chat about it, as we talk about it. So, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swami, it's an important point for us. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought this point out and pointed to the 5th chapter of Brahma Samhita, which he found in South India. And he found the Krishna Karnamrita. And he said, while in the Brahma Samhita we find the Siddhanta, the Tattva, and in this other book, Krishna Karnamrita, we find the Bhava, because Bilva Mangala Thakur has written about the Bhava of Radha in Krishna Karnamrita. And I brought this up because I'm speaking about the scholarship of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, who again wrote the Govinda Lilamrita and another book which was a Sanskrit commentary on Krishna Karnamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami Ki Jai. And here he's written a real tome, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and tried to take that which was previously only written about in Sanskrit and then arguably only read and discussed in smaller circles, the Brahminical community, put it into a local vernacular, into Bengali. He's trying to take the treasure of the Goswami's texts, which are an attempt to institutionalize through literature the ecstasy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I've compared it before, the ecstasy of Mahaprabhu to like a great Madhuvan waterfall. Whoa, you have to kind of stand back. It's so beautiful. But they took it and turned it into a lake, like we did there, for those of you who've been there. And you can approach it, swim in it, drink from it, and so forth, in the form of their literature. They took the ecstasy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and they located it on the map of the sacred texts and explained it. And Krishnadas Goswami, Kaviraj Goswami, taking and putting it in Bengali is like, these are like, you don't understand. He's like, these are like secrets, right? And secrets of secrets. Even in Vaikuntha, they don't know about this. They don't understand it. And that's not to fault them. They have their bhava, and it's beautiful. It's charming. I've told the story before. I'm reminded of, and I'll repeat it to you. When I was once in South India visiting with a godbrother of mine, and he took me to a Sanskrit school, and the head teacher there, Brahmin in the Ramanuja Sampradaya, had been helping my godbrother with some things, and he had invited us for lunch, and we took lunch, and then we were taking prasad, engage in Krishna Katha, and he was very jolly. And my godbrother said, Prabhu, whenever we talk about Krishna, you become very jolly. He said, oh, yes, yes, yes. And then he said, but if we talk about Narayan, and before my godbrother could say another word, that did what he said, that is another thing. Folded his hands like, that is another thing. Became so sober, and I thought, oh, he's from Vaikuntha, this man. He's standing, he's a Vaikuntha man before us. Right? This is his bhava. So it's beautiful. It was very beautiful. Reminds me of another story. Same godbrother, we were in his ashram, helping him to establish the deity there. And afterwards, there was a program in a village nearby, held by either Madhvas or Ramanuja Sampradaya, I forget which one. And so he wanted to send a couple of representatives there. So one of them was a young man, African American, who had just taken sannyas, and another couple of sannyasis. And so I suggested, you go. And he came and he asked me, he said, what should I do there? I said, you just go there and pay your obeisances. Right? So they went, right? And the acharya from this Ramanuja Sampradaya, one of the acharyas, was the main feature. He came, he sat, and everybody is, very reverential and so forth. And here this young sannyasi, he just walked up and laid out flat, paid his dandavats. He wasn't trying to bring any attention to himself whatsoever. But I said to him, when you go there, just consider that you're in the presence of a man from Vaikuntha, of a Vishnu Duta, a messenger from Vaikuntha. So then you can understand how to act. If somebody from Vaikuntha or a great sage like a Narada or a Durvasa comes to Vrindavan, how do the gopis act? How do the gopas treat him? Do they say, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, we are higher than you, you pay obeisances to us? They don't say that, no. That doesn't enter their mind at all, right? They pay their obeisances to Narada. Oh, Narada, this morning that rishi, Gargacharya, Trinadapi, Sunichena, Tadorapi Seshnana, Amanina Manadena, Kirtanaya Sadahari. This is the standard of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates, of the Brajbasis. There, Sanatana Goswami in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, towards the end, he says, the nature of prema is that it increases humility, and the nature of humility is that it increases prema. In this way, they play off one another, which is a very interesting point, because we're talking about eternity, but in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the eternity is not static. Radha's prema is said to be full. What else? Ever increasing. How can it be full and ever increasing? Reason leaves off there. It's a very interesting concept of eternity. All the leelas are eternal, and there are new leelas every day, and new members. Thankfully, there's room for more, even though it's full. It means that the sentiments of Bhagavan and his capacity to taste rasa is unlimited. He needs more ears, more tongues, more noses, more bodies. The Swarup, the Bhakti Swarup, it exists in the depths of the being of God. It's a manifestation of his own self, which we are as well. We're Abed and Abed. From the Abed side, we're non-different. And when that gopi or gopa it experiences something sensually in the Leela, Krishna's tasting, experiencing it through them, right? So he went, this sannyasi, and he didn't try to bring attention to himself. He just thought, I'm before a man in Vaikuntha, a man from Vaikuntha, of a Vishnu Duta, laid out in paid obeisances. In that acharya, everyone was trying to get his attention. This sannyasi was not trying to get it. He was trying to be humble, and he got all the attention. That sannyasi, that acharya, just all of his attention came on that, and then all of the devotees. So the way of humility is as recommended by Mahaprabhu. People think that you have to get ahead, you have to step on other people's heads, and we think we have to let people step on our heads, then we can get ahead. The right people, right? If the opportunity comes that we can be humbled, well, we should not avoid that, right? We should try to embrace that. So Kaviraj Goswami here, he is taking these secrets of Golok that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embodied, that the Goswamis deciphered and wrote about in Sanskrit in a careful way, because they want to be a little careful. They can't say too much or they'll be dismissed. A boy from Bengal, he's Krishna and Radha combined. What are you talking about? So they referenced their points. They talk a little bit about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, prefacing all their books with respect for him and so forth, and writing about Krishna. And Kaviraj Goswami is taking the whole thing, and as Prabhupada used to say, in like a needle and out like a plow. So a needle just has one point. If you go in with a needle, it'll make a small hole. But if inside the needle turns into a plow, like this, then you pull it out, it will make a huge hole, right? So this is the kind of the way of preaching. In like a needle, you find a way in, find a teachable moment, and then out like a plow. So Kaviraj, in his time, is coming out like a plow, writing about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Bengali, right? And giving it to the common people, all these secrets, sharing it with them, and confident or controversial points of Siddhanta, like this one we mentioned, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, and arguing it, and so forth. So it's a very extraordinary work. And here we find, at the beginning of the chapter, an example of his Sanskrit scholarship. As I say, each of the chapters, for the most part, begin with a Sanskrit verse of his own composition. He didn't write in Bengali because he didn't know Sanskrit. We've talked about his other works, his commentary and on Krishna Karnamrita, his Govinda Lilamrita, and so forth. And he wrote this at a very old age, as he tells us himself earlier on in the Adi Lila. And from a very humble setting there at Radhakund. So the verse here, we've cited it. That verse at the beginning of each chapter typically will highlight something in the chapter that he feels is central to it or significant. And here the chapter is, of course, about the beginning of the Lord's tour. For my own taste, other events are more tasty in this chapter than the one that he's highlighted. But the one that he's highlighted is one that perhaps speaks about something that he's trying to do in the text from the point of view of tattva, and this is the point we've been discussing, which is that the divinity of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, maybe not the full Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, but his godhood, So he cites, what does he say? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Danyam Tam Nomi Chaitanyam. The auspicious Chaitanya, Tam Nomi, I offer my respects unto my bow before him, Vasudevam Dayadradhi. The Vasudev, a Brahmin named Vasudev Dayadradhi, he was very full, he showed great compassion to him. This is a very compassionate Leela, particularly. The Madhya Leela is in general, But South India, I would say, in particular, many examples of his showing compassion to devotees there. He says, Nashta kushtam rupa pushtam bhakti tushtam chakaraya. He says that Nashta kushtam, he was cured. He had a disease, he had leprosy. He was cured. Nashta kushtam rupa pushtam. What was the extent to which he was cured? Because if you have leprosy, your body breaks out with open sores and so forth, right? So nashta kushtam, rupa pushtam. He gave him a beautiful body. Rupa means beautiful. He made his body beautiful. He touched him. He embraced the leper. This is a kind of like a Mother Teresa, the Mother Teresa partial avatar of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, an aspect of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Why not? He is Swayam Bhagawan. Mother Teresa, ki jai. So he says, Nashta kushtam, rupa pushtam, bhakti tushtam. So he embraced him, he transformed him, and satisfied and gave him full satisfaction, tushtam, by giving him bhakti. Right? So this comes later on in the text. I think we'll skip ahead to it, okay, and see what is said there. When he finally gets to this point. So he had, there are sweeter parts of the text, I say, it's immediately following, at the onset of the text, the feelings between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates and the difficulty for them that arises out of his sannyas, the distance that it creates between them that they long to overcome, and that he does as well. So we'll go back to that in our next discussion, but now we skip ahead. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has already left. We'll hear about that and how he managed to go, despite the fact that he didn't want to leave and nobody wanted him to leave, and so forth. But traveling and so forth, he met a Brahmin, Kurma. We'll come to that. And after leaving the house of the Brahmin Kurma, he met at Kurma Chetra, he met a Brahmin named Kurma. And the Brahmin invited him for lunch, and then he wanted to go with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Mahaprabhu said, what? There's a famous verse. What did he say? He said, I can't remember. Very famous verse. Prabhupada liked to quote it so many times. Yare deke koraka. Krishna Upadesh. Amaragna Guru Hai Tare Desh. He said, no, you don't follow me. You stay where you are in your own place, and on my agya, my order, you be Guru here and teach the people. Anyway, we'll come to that. But so he left now, Kurma's place. And the Brahmin, Vasudeva, who was a leper, heard that this wonderful sannyasi had come to Kurma Chetra. So he went to Kurma Brahman's house to search him out. But when he arrived, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had already left. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his omniscience, understanding that Vasudeva had come, he returned. He came back to bestow his compassion upon Vasudeva. So, Prabhur Gamana Kurma Mukhete Shuniya Bhumete Pordila Dukhe Muchita Hansha. The leper, when the leper Vasudeva came to Kurma's house, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was informed that Mahaprabhu had already left. Thus he fell unconscious on the ground. When Vasudeva was lamenting due to not being able to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu returned suddenly and embraced him. Prabhu sparshe dukkha shange kushta dure gela ananda sahite anga sundara huila. When Mahaprabhu touched him, both the leprosy and his distress disappeared, right? His body became very beautiful, and he became full of happiness. So this is a Bengali verse that just really echoes the Sanskrit verse at the beginning of the chapter. And Prabhur Kripa Deki Tanra Mishmay Holaman Shloka Paddi Paye Dhari Kore Stavan. The Brahman Vasudeva was astonished, you can imagine, to behold the wonderful mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he began to recite a verse from the Bhagavatam. Kwaham daridra papiyan kwa Krishna Shri Niketanaha Brahmabandhuriti smaham bahubhyam parirambitaha. So he was a Brahmin. He knew the Bhagavatam. He's a devotee. He quoted a nice verse from the Bhagavatam. What is the verse? This is a verse from the 81st chapter of the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, spoken by a friend of Krishna, a close friend of Krishna in his days as a student. Krishna went to Mathura to free Vasudeva and Devaki, and then he was sent to Avantipur, is it? To learn, along with Balaram, to learn from Sandipani Muni, all of the arts and sciences and so forth at the Gurukula, right? And of course, the famous incident there was that Krishna and Sudama, Brahmana, this is different than Krishna's friend Sudama. There's three Sudamas that come to mind. There's Sudama in Vrindavan, Krishna's very close friend. Some text depict him as the older brother of Rupa Manjari. They had the leader of the Manjaris in Madhurya Rasa and Braj. Sudama, but anyway, very dear to Krishna. And when Krishna went to Mathura to free Vasudeva and Devaki from the prison of Kamsa, on the way to freeing them and ultimately slaying Kamsa, Krishna met different people along the road. One of them was a florist who was a devotee of Krishna. And in order to get flowers for his business, he would go outside of the vicinity of Mathura into the rural areas, into the Braj, and get flowers. And he would hear stories about Krishna. That's all he did. He heard those stories. And he fell in love with Krishna as a friend. And suddenly, one day, Krishna and Balaram appear at his door, surrounded by their friends. Can you imagine? He had the darshan of Krishna and Balaram and their friends. And Krishna said, I'm very attracted to you because your name is Sudama. It reminds me of my friend in Braj, right? And then he looked, and the most valuable garland he took and gave to Krishna and to Balaram and blessed him and turned him into a saka right there before everyone's eyes. Because, he's named Sudama. Therefore, I love him just like my Sudama of Braj. So valuable. What's in a name, huh? Could be quite a bit. And now there's the Sudama and his classmate. This is relative to this verse, right? Three Sudamas. He also was in Sakyarasa. His Sakyarasa is a little different. We don't know. A little different. His Sakyarasa is called what is the term? Anyway, it's like a city friend rather than a rural friend. Um, Puri Sambandha, yeah, Puri Sambandha. And the famous story, of course, from the Gurukul days is that on one occasion, Krishna and Sudama, as brahmacharis doing the bidding of the Guru, went out to collect firewood. And in the course of collecting firewood, a great storm came and they could not find their way home. And Gurudev stayed up all night wondering where are they, what happened. And in the morning, he went out with a whole search party to find them and so forth, right? And it's very touching how Krishna carried firewood for his guru, how delicate his body is, and he was doing this. And of course, so there's a bond between him and Sudama. And the next thing you know, of course, Krishna moves on from Mathura to Dwarka, and he's not only he's not in a metropolitan area, but in a celestial city where everything is. There have been blessings from the gods. It's a very extraordinary, opulent place. There, Prince Krishna and Balaram interacting with the Adus. And there's Sridham Brahman, Sudama Brahman is there with his wife, and he's very, very poor, right? That's the story. He's very poor. And his wife says, how can you be so poor when your friend, from school is so rich? What kind of friend is that? We can't even, not sure if we're going to get rice the next day, and you're spending all your time in religious activities. You have no practically a occupational duty that's bringing in. Anyway, they were very poor. So she pushed him, why don't you go and ask Krishna? He's like your friend from school, right? And he's like a prince. He's looking at how the gods are giving him, all blessings. And he was very reluctant, to go and ask anything from Krishna. We're taught about this higher standard, but don't let it get in your way. If you're really pressed that you've got to have something less than the higher standard, at least in the immediate, pray to Krishna for that too. We shouldn't pray to Krishna for material things, but it's better to pray to Krishna for material things than to build a temple for Shiva and ask him for that. That's a secret. It's better to ask Krishna. What does the Bhagavatam say in the second canto? When if you want this, worship him. If you want that, worship him. If you want this, worship her. And it goes on and on. At the end it says, but in the end, when it's all said and done, akama sarvakamo va moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Whether you have all desires, you desire no desires, or do you desire liberation, do bhakti yoga to Krishna, right? With attention. I would strongly recommend that if you have material desires that you just like, unless I could get that fulfilled, it's really an obstacle for me. My mind is too disturbed. Approach Govardhan. He's very kind in this way. I read a book written by a scholar about Govardhan, not a year or so ago, and he's a Indologist, I guess. He became actually a devotee of the Vallabha Sampradaya. But he wrote a book about worshiping Govardhan, which is prominent in the Vallabha Sampradaya, and of course in our Sampradaya. I kind of chuckled in the first part of the book because he was going on and on about how it's weird, right, to worship a stone. He's writing to an educated Western audience, right? I know you think it's weird to worship a stone. I can empathize with you. And you may think this is kind of like what he was saying, in a different scholarly language and so on and so forth. But I had to kind of chuckle because I thought every religion is weird. In another religion that everybody accepts without thinking about it, in the audience that he's writing to, the Christian religion, they're turning wine and water into blood and body of Christ. I mean, that's pretty weird too. You believe that? You really believe that? Right? So that is the standard of religious life. It should be miracles. It should be miraculous, right? After all, that it's hard. Really, that's essentially it's about turning away. To speak about it even superficially, it's about turning. I shouldn't say at the heart. Turning away from the outer world. That means harnessing the human passions, right? That's miraculous. right? That's why I say, people may ask, do you believe in God? I say, yes. They say, have you seen God? I'll say, well, a better question is, better answers, I've seen love of God. I can show that to you. Many, many examples. And how can there be love of God if there's no God, right? You have to have, this is a Chintya Beta. You have to have the object of love and the love there to be loved. They're one and they're different. I can show you so many examples of love of God. And when we, wherever we find it, we enter the realm of what you call miraculous. It's beyond the ken of the senses and the mind and the intellect, right? You come in touch with He who put a tree instead of a seed, right? There's the thing, the idea. Have you seen? Like, I haven't seen God anywhere. There's nowhere that I. The reply is, there's nowhere I've not seen Him. This is the view of the Mahabhagavata, right? He's everywhere and everything. So anyway, that was an interesting, funny kind of part of the book for me to think about. But when he went on in the book, he gave many nice examples of devotees of Govardhan, and these and there's two basic classes, you could say, of devotees: those who worship Govardhan for material reasons. Oh, Govardhan, I want to open a business and make money so that my family will be peaceful, and then we can more easily practice Krishna consciousness. Yeah. Or it just maybe just like, oh, my mother's very dear to me, and now she has cancer, and please save her, and so forth. So that's one level, one class of devotees of Govardhan, and there's another class. They're praying only for praying, right? Only for praying. You can find both classes doing Dandavat Parikram around Govardhan. Have you ever walked around Govardhan? Yes. Right? Takes a few hours. What to speak if you're going to do it like this? Lay down, get up, put your feet where your hands are, lay down again, and do it again, and do all the way around Govardhan. And each time laying down, making your prayer. Oh Govardhan, please free my mother from cancer. Oh Govardhan. You can think, he's doing all that just for that, you think. But it is a big thing, actually. You might think, we don't do that. We don't pray to Krishna for material things. I want them. I try to get them. I just don't pray to Krishna for them. Because I'm not supposed to do that. But these devotees, they're Sakama devotees, right? They have desire. They acknowledge it, and they ask Krishna to fulfill it. They say, I'm your devotee, and I need this, and you please help me. Well, I think they may have more faith in Govardhan than some of us, right? They believe Govardhan will do it. And then in the book, he gives so many examples of it happening, so many examples. So Govardhan lends himself in this way more than I've seen in any other of our deities in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. That's very beautiful. What is their faith? What is their belief in the stone god? Isn't it all about faith? Isn't the measure of our adhikar determined by our faith? It's very curious. They have such deep faith in him, and they want something material from him. There's a contrast. It's very, very interesting. But something to be learned from them, to be sure. So the Brahman Sudama, he didn't want to ask anything from Krishna, but his wife pushed him, and so he thought, well, anyway, excuse to go and see Krishna, my friend. We look at it like that. So he enters the palace, and they let him in, and there's Krishna being worshipped by Rukmini, and she has that compliant love, and some Aishwarya, and the supreme goddess of fortune there. and in walks this impoverished Brahmin. And what does Krishna do? Jumps off of his dais, puts his friend on the dais, worships him, right? And and um, and he says, I think you brought something for me. He had to bring something, but all he had was broken rice, not even, whole nice grains, right? Chipped rice. He had. That's all he had. He thought, I'll bring something back. He wasn't really inclined to give it to Krishna. What, you're going to give chipped rice to Prince Krishna, right? And Krishna said, I think you brought something for me. No. Yes. And Krishna grabbed it, snatched that rice, said, opened it up, and he began to eat raw rice, like 1 grain, 2 grain. The Rukmini grabbed him, stop. You eat another grain, he'll be so rich, he won't know what to do with himself, She is giving the benediction, Lakshmi, right? Seeing that. And the Brahmin didn't ask for anything, right? He just went home and he found his house had transformed into a palace and so on and so forth. So here's how he prayed to Krishna. This is this verse, right? He says, Sridham says, who am I? A poor Brahma Bandhu, he says. Qua daridra papiyan. Qua? Krishna. Shiniketanaha. Who am I? And who is Krishna? Ka. Who? Aham am I? Daridra papiyan. He says, I'm poor and sinful. Qua? Who is Krishna, on the other hand? Shiniketana. Shiniketana, the shelter of everything. He's Swami Bhagavan. And who am I next to him? You see, his fraternal love is capable of being overwhelmed by Aishvarya, unlike the Sudama of Braj, right? Like Arjuna's fraternal love was caused to recede when Krishna showed the universe inside of him in Bhagavad Gita. So he says, who am I and who is Krishna? He says, Ami Brahma Bandhu. If I'm a Brahmin, really, I'm only just a friend of a Brahmin. I'm not even really a Brahmin. This is how he thought of himself. And Krishna's, again, the shelter of everything, and full of all opulences, and Bahubhyam Varirambita, and he embraced me. This is the verse that Vasudev cited. It's a very nice verse because here the Brahmin Sudam does not think I'm a devotee even. What to speak of that? He thinks, I'm not even a Brahmin. I'm just a friend of the Brahmin. I'm a lowly person. But see who Krishna is. So we have hope from this. We get great hope from this. What is our condition? It doesn't matter. What matters is what is Krishna's position? What is his nature? What is his disposition? He embraced the Brahman. And he embraced the Brahman Vasudev in the form of Gaur Krishna, right? He made his body beautiful. Sriman Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. So Krishna has selected this section of the chapter to highlight the merciful, compassionate nature of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his capacity to perform miraculous activities, Samaishvarya. So we'll end there. Any questions? Yes.
Guru Maharaj, Krishna is saying in Srimad Bhagavatam that he fulfills material desire of his devotees, in such a way that he or she will not repeatedly ask for more such desire. So you recommend the worship of Govardhan. So Govardhan, he fulfills this desire differently than other form of Krishna?
try him out. You have to try him out.
I will translate. Guru Maharaj, Krishna mówił w Śrimad Bhagavatam, że on spełnia materialne pragnienia swoich wielbicieli, ale w taki sposób, że taki bhakta, materialistyczny, sakama bhakta, nie będzie ciągle i ciągle prosił o więcej takich pragnień. I więc to, że polecasz czczenie Govardhana, to znaczy, że on trochę inaczej spełnia materialne pragnienia niż inne formy.
We have to be a little wise, and I think if we, of course, what Krishna is saying there in the 11th canto that you're citing is that my devotees approach me for material desires. I fulfill those desires in such a way that they don't ask for them anymore. And so what he's really saying there is, if you approach me even with material desires, ultimately you will attain love for me, because you developed a tendency to take shelter of me. Somehow or other, and that will ultimately override and come to bear fruit. Therefore, even if you have material desires, as Bhagavatam says, best to approach him. So I don't think we should take it to be literally that it means if you approach me for one material desire, I'll give you that, but then never anything else again. That's not like that. Not like that. No. What else? Another question?
If Krishna is feeling all the feelings of his devotees, if he's experiencing those emotions, why the need then to manifest as Lord Chaitanya?
Because Radha is his devotee.
Yes.
Well, that's a good question, and I think that I'd have to think about that a little bit. But the point is, of course, that you're raising that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wants to experience himself through the eyes and from within the bhava of Radha. Well, as I said, I mean, it's a Chintya Beta Beta, so you can say he is experiencing it and he's not. How's that? At the same time. I mean, I was just speaking about it in a broader way to emphasize the Beda. That Krishna manifests, I mean, well, kind of, we're within time and space, it's hard to talk about it, but the relationships, it's interpenetrating, it's true. I mean, the oneness and difference are interpenetrating. It's a chintya, that's my answer. A chintya. But he, to say that he wanted to taste the bhava of Radha, it's also, you could say it's a way of talking about it, and the result is a dispensation that's very great. And the other way to look at it, of course, is that Radha and Krishna, they're one. So Radha is a little different than the devotees, and every devotee has a little bit of Radha in them. Radha is a deity for us, along with Krishna, as much as she's also an example of devotion. The problem is for Radha and Krishna is that I think that that Radha wants to become one with Krishna in love, and Krishna wants to become with Radha in love. But the closer they come together, what happens is that Radha starts to think like Krishna, and Krishna starts to think like Radha, and again they're separate. So that has resolved their desire to be unified in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's very esoteric and interesting theological idea to emphasize the importance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So anyway, one and different. To get the full experience, right? Exclusive experience. To step out of his shoes and into hers once and for all.
I have a related question. She was speaking about earlier that, for example, the sakhas, Achincha Beta Bait, that Krishna is experiencing through them, through their senses.
Yeah.
And so.
And at the same time, they're different from him.
Right.
Entirely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so some people will say, for example, the Srishti Leela, the material world, that God's experiencing through us, and so we can do whatever we like in some ways, but to some degree, because God's experiencing through us, we are God, and God's experiencing through us. So what would be the distinction there between the two realms, if you will?
Well, the distinction is, in one sense, the absence of love of God, which brings about the union. Without that, there's an apparent difference that dictates, your life, and is in opposition to Him. So God may have manifested, or the Srishti created the world, but the people in it aren't cooperating with Him. So it's one thing to cooperate with Him and to love Him and to serve Him, and then arguably for Him to experience Himself in relation to His devotee who's seeing Him in a certain light and loving Him. How can He do that with someone who's turning away from Him, right? Characteristic of the Buddhaji was he turned away from Bhagavan. So how can someone who's turning away from Bhagavan be someone through whom Bhagavan is experiencing and relishing joy, the joy of rasa? Is that good enough answer? Yeah. Yes.
As you were talking about devotees who approach Krishna for material desire, while you were speaking, I was reminded of Dhruva Maharaj.
Dhruva Maharaj ki jai. Yeah.
Dhruva had approached, he
wanted a
big thing.
Bigger than Brahmaloka.
Yeah. But when he saw the Krishna appear and showed himself, Prabhupada would cite this verse. I don't know where it's from, but Swami
Yeah.
So I was looking for broken pieces of glass. But now I've seen you, I found the real jewel. So I don't want the glass anymore.
Yes.
But Krishna said, take it anyway.
Take it and do something for me with it. Yes. Yes.
You mentioned this key statement of Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna's Bhagavan Swayam. So such a statement is unique for this Purana, or in other Puranas like Shiva Puranas or Vishnu Purana, we can find similar statements like Shiva's Bhagavan Swayam or Vishnu's Bhagavan Swayam.
I don't know about the Vishnu Bhagavan Swami, but I think you can find something like that in the Shiva Purana. I've heard about it. Shiva's tu Bhagavan Swayam. I don't know if it's the same. It would be peculiar if it was the exact same phrase, but Brigu says he doesn't know about that, our scholar. But I think that, undoubtedly the Shiva Purana is saying that the Shiva is the supreme in so many ways. That said, with regard to the Shiva Purana, it's thought that the Sanat Kumar Samhita is a part of the Shiva Purana, and the Sanat Kumar Samhita is drawn very heavily upon by the Goswamis. There, the idea of Manjari Bhav is found. So, I haven't studied the Shiva Purana, but yeah, the different Puranas are emphasizing the supremacy of the deity of the Purana. So that's why it's so beautiful what Jiva Goswami did to give us a way of resolving those apparent contradictions by giving us the central focus of the Bhagavatam in a context to understand those statements. For example, the relativity of different scriptures is a strong point of Jiva Goswami. It's something we should emphasize, because these days, if you quote a book that's written in Sanskrit or Bengali, in some devotee circles, it's like, therefore, see, whatever was the context, whatever was the the book was about, just because it's written in Sanskrit and it's part, even if it's considered to be part of the body of the sacred texts, it doesn't mean it has any bearing on what we will think that it will serve as a support for any of the devotional conclusions of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It said, Shruti Smriti Puranadi Pancharattika Vinimina Ikontiki Harayad Bhakti Ruprayava Kalpate. That bhakti that is not in accordance with the Shruti, Smriti, Puranas, etc., is a disturbance to the society. So someone may think, see, therefore, you should follow the Manu Samhita. But Jiva Goswami comments on, Rupa Goswami cites this verse in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. What he's talking about is that there was a class of Buddhists who also did apparent bhakti to Buddha, who did not accept the sacred texts. And Jiva Goswami, Rupa Goswami is saying this is a disturbance to the society. And Jiva Goswami comments, when it says Shruti Smriti Puranadi, this is relative to what your path is. So if you're on the path of Krishna Bhakti, then you should follow the Shruti relevant, the Smritis relevant to Shuddha Bhakti, not those that pertain to, for example, the path of Varnashram, like Manasamhita. So what was your question again?
If we are finding similar statements in other Puranas.
Right. So Jiva Goswami, I'm speaking about the relativity of Scripture, because we think, all the Scripture is sacred and it's whatever it says, we have to take. You have to be a little thoughtful. And who could make the point stronger than Jiva Goswami? And his Sattva Sandarbha says some Puranas are for people who are predominantly influenced by Sattva Guna, some by Raja Guna, some by Tama Guna. Therefore, it's spoken of the teaching is spoken in a certain way that they will embrace it. And let somebody, a ghost worshiper, or somebody like, there are people like that, give him a deity, Shiva. He accepts them. He's Bhutanath. So let's instill faith in them in Shiva, because they're going to have an aptitude to that, and that's a good beginning. It could be an end too. I mean, so that's fine. So he's pointing out there the relativity of certain scriptures, right? Like I say, I wrote a book, a circle of friends I was telling you about. If I had secretly had it all translated into Bengali and made it look old and put somebody else's name on it, it'd be very popular, Everybody would say, oh, it's a great book, Right. So yeah, this is not. It's often thought, well, see these Puranas, they're just written by people who are praising one god or another god to have control over the people. The Brahmins want control over the people, so they're writing the books like this and so forth. But no, there's another more beautiful way to look at that and show how they're all saying the same thing, but they're all talking to very different people in diverse circumstances of diverse temperaments who need to hear it in a different way with a different emphasis and so forth, right? And that's what Vedanta Sutra is trying to do, and Bhagavatam is said to be the long hand of the cliff notes that constitute the Vedanta Sutra. So, all right. What time is it? Okay, we stop for a few minutes and then off to Shivaloka. Ki Jai. Go with Premanandi.